Thank you. What an awesome event and evening. We're so proud to be here. You know, particularly amongst our Game Warden Association, and several of us made the trip down for this event. We think it's really appropriate that we can present this award for best conservation. Montana Game Wardens have over 100 years of dedicated service protecting our resources in the state of Montana. We're very proud of that, and just like many of you, you know, we think conservation is built one field contact at a time. For you, it's built one video series production at a time. We're so fortunate to live in North America and in these United States. Wildlife conservation is supreme and unmatched anywhere else in the world. All right, this year's winner of Best Conservation, Shawn Michaels, McMillan River Adventures.
This is McMillan River Adventures. This is the guy that champions, you know, the wolf issue, which, you know, which is what this show is about, which is important to both of us.
And I really want to pay a special thanks to Ted Nugent, because that guy, I mean, he really gives me the fire to do stuff like this. We talked to him many times when we were putting this show together, and really I and probably a lot of folks in the room wouldn't be able to do what we do if it wasn't for Ted.
Amen.
And also I want to thank Big Game Forever. They're an organization out there that's really on the front lines, battling like crazy on conservation issues, especially like this wolf issue, and thanks.
In the early 1970s, there was a recognition that certain species truly were endangered, that if the federal government got involved and promulgated regulations and a statute that would protect these species and would supersede all state laws, then maybe the endangered species could be brought to a better position and could actually be saved, and their numbers could greatly increase. And that certainly has happened in many areas. So the Endangered Species Act, you know, certainly can claim credit for some successes, but at the same time, there have been some side effects and some unintended consequences of that act, and I think the story of the wolf is one of those unintended consequences.
Big Game Forever is an organization that I founded, and it was specifically to address the issue of the wolf overpopulation, and more specifically, we wanted to take on the issue of having Congress address the specific issue of wolves and what was going on in the courts.
I would imagine that they probably didn't envision the huge negative impact that the wolf would have on elk in these states.
You know, when they first started this, they thought if we can just stop hunting, if things get low, then they'll rebound. That hasn't worked. And in fact, in a bunch of areas, wolves are the #1 killers, not only of the male elk, which are the ones that are typically harvested, but also the females, but most importantly, the young elk. Recruitment of the young elk is the key. And when your wolves start killing too many young, you get a recruitment that falls below 25%. Really, 40% is what you want, but if it falls below 25%, then you're into danger zone. In a lot of these areas, it's below 10%.
And you know, you talk about conservation out west, I mean, there's nobody, and I mean nobody, that's fighting harder for us hunters, which are the truest conservationists on the planet, than my good friend Don Pay, who would have loved to have been with us right now, but Don's actually back in Washington, D.C. with his sleeves rolled up, fighting for us hunters.
In the trenches.
Fellow sportsmen, I'm here in Washington, D.C. tonight, and we talked with congressmen from Northwest Ohio that told us how they used to get a limit of pheasants every time they'd go out. Pheasants have disappeared. We talked to congressmen from Michigan and Minnesota that have seen the dramatic negative impacts of unmanaged wolf populations, not only on moose, but on whitetail. Seeing herds disappear. We know from studies now down in Georgia, coyotes are having a dramatic negative impact on whitetail populations. Out west, we've seen the wolves dramatically reduce hunting opportunity, in fact, literally putting outfitters out of business because there's simply not enough game to hunt.
You know, Shawn, the one thing that'll get politicians' attention is votes, and that's why Big Game Forever is trying so hard to get the sportsman and hunting community together as one to have a bigger voice that'll open a few doors.
Yeah, well, and again, you and I both know there's some great conservation groups out there, and they all do a great deal of work. But how many do you know go to the brain trust of America, Washington, D.C., and get you into doors,
Right.
into offices with politicians. Big Game Forever is out there getting it done in the trenches in Washington, D.C., and that's what makes them so much different than everybody else.
Right. I mean, we were there, and we were in setting U.S. senators' offices. We were in setting U.S. House of Representative offices. We sat in on meetings. And I'll tell you what, I was very impressed with those that get it.
We're overpopulated in wolves. They're not an endangered species by any stretch of the imagination, and they ought to be delisted.
And the introduction of the wolf back in the 1990s into Yellowstone National Park has had a horrible impact.
It might be fanciful or for folks to think about wolves in the wild. For a lot of our ranchers, that's the difference in whether they're going to be able to feed their family or not.
This is a continuous battle with those who are unfriendly to big game.
There's been incredible abuse of the Endangered Species Act.
So many times, especially in this town, people lead with ideology instead of, problem-solving compromise.
Well, I think it's critical that we do what's right for our animals that are just being devastated by these doggone wolves.
Realistically, you shouldn't have to go through another act of Congress to take something off the list.
We have some real heroes out there in our Intermountain West, and who have fought for some balance here.
It's that balance that the West has always understood. Some of the great conservationists are our ranchers and our farmers, and we need to balance all of our resources so that everybody has an opportunity to be successful.
Well, I think that there are people that are expert in this, like those with Big Game Forever, and they saw this coming.
Well, I love the Big Game Forever group, and when you think about it, they not only are fighting to keep big game alive, they actually put their monies where their mouths are. And frankly, without them, I don't think we would have been able to beat back some of the radical environmentalists who basically don't seem to understand the balance that nature needs to have.
People from the Rocky Mountain West know how devastating the wolf has been to both livestock and wildlife. And when I talk to sportsmen and ranchers, Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal, they want to make sure that decisions are made locally, not in Washington. For our sportsmen of all political backgrounds, they know how devastating the wolf has been